Workin It Out, a podcast show about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces, our communities, and our lives. A show where we put diversity and inclusion to work.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Workin It Out, the show where we put diversity and inclusion to work. This episode of Workin It Out will feature the hot topic, Transgender Realities. And we're going to have this phenomenal person to talk to us about the show, Monroe Alise. But before we get into the show, I just want to tell you a little bit about my why, because I always ask our guests their why of discussing a particular topic. But my why is this. I was in a conversation with a very good friend of mine that I respect tremendously in this diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And as we were talking, she said, Vanessa, I'm for everything in DEI. I'm for fighting for DEI. But I just can't go there on this transgender thing. I just can't go there. And I was shocked. I was like, well, what do you mean you can't go there? Go where? And she wasn't very clear about it. But more importantly, I don't think my defense of it, of talking about the transgender realities was strong enough. And I thought, you know what? I got to get better at this. And we are so fortunate to have Monroe Alise, who is a champion of transgender people's rights and privileges, to be a part of the show. And I know you all know Monroe Alise. She is the breakout star on P-Valley. And she also is on The Chi. On P-Valley, she's Monroe. And on The Chi, she's Isis Monroe. And so we thought, my goodness, not only do we have a phenomenal actress to be part of this conversation, but to really take us on this journey to better understand. She's going to really take us to school to better understand these transgender realities so we can be more knowledgeable and committed to engage in this conversation. So I want to welcome Monroe Alise to our show today.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. That was one introduction. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. I appreciate you for opening your space.
So I'm just looking forward
Yeah.
to having more of this conversation and having our audience to become more educated and really connected at the heart
Yeah.
around the
Absolutely.
realities that you and transgender people are dealing with each and every day.
Absolutely.
So tell me, Monroe, and so not only are you on The Chi and you're on P-Valley, but you have a new movie that's coming out on
Yes,
BET.
yes.
Tell us a little bit about that before we get into the rest of our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So, Fighting to Be Me, the DeWin Curry story, is going to be out on BET Plus February the 27th. And it is about the true story of DeWin Curry, who now identifies as a transgender person. At that time, a non-binary individual going through their own personal struggles, life, drugs, all of those things, and still having to face those difficulties with their self-identity and self-expression. I'm truly excited for the role that I play on there. It's a very pivotal role. You have to see it. I think that it's going to be relatable, especially to the trans realities, especially with the topic that we're talking about. But to know this woman is to love her. She's such an inspiration to us all. I call her Auntie Dwayne. And I really, really love her. And to just know that everything that she's went through and overcame, it is absolutely phenomenal and a journey nonetheless.
Well, your career continues to expand. You're so talented and gifted. So we're blessed to be a part of the journey with you. So let's get back to our topic. I am going to watch that show, by the way.
Yes, thank
Let
you.
us know. When we talk about, use the term transgender, what does it mean? I mean, folks are like a little confused or a little
Yeah.
ignorant about that.
Yeah.
Describe and define that for us.
Yeah, so, transgender, the word itself literally means not the same, right? So, or not identifying the same. So just like cisgender means the same, transgender means not the same, right? So not the same as assigned at birth. So if I am a I consider myself a woman of the trans experience, meaning I identify in my womanhood first by way of transitioning, right? And
Okay.
so, for the sake of this conversation, I'll use transgender woman to say that I am a transgender woman. I do not identify with my assigned sex at birth.
Okay.
So that's what transgender means.
All right. Okay. I've often heard many trans people say that being trans is like being born in the wrong body. Is that
Hmm.
part of what you're saying? And can you help
Absolutely.
our viewers understand what does that feel like? What is that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll give you my personal experience, and I know, and as I've shared this story of mine multiple times, it still saddens me that this is something that is still relevant to this day in
Hmm.
regards to bathrooms. Right? When I was a child, like most children, we all used the same bathroom in the house. My
Hmm.
mom used the same bathroom as my dad, my brothers, my sisters, my siblings,
Hmm.
and so I remember going to school as far as pre-K, and being in school, I became friends with a young girl, and we really clicked in school, having a great time. It was bathroom time, and
Hmm.
as I followed her into the bathroom, the teacher snatched me out of the bathroom and said, "No, boys don't go in there, girls do." And that was the first time I identified that something was different with
Uh,
me. That now, mind you, I was getting reprimanded at home for walking a certain type of way or talking a certain type of way, and making sure that I wasn't playing with the Barbies when my girl cousins came over. But I never identified it as that was something on the inside that didn't match something on the outside, and that was the first time I was told or I knew that something was different. And so, yeah.
and how did that impact you then? That's the first time that you were told
Hmm. And
something's
of course,
different.
as a child, I don't have the language that I have now, but I knew
Hmm.
then that survival mode then took over. I had to start pretending to get along to just
Hmm.
survive. I couldn't like and ask for things that I wanted truly. I was the child that believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and things like that. And so when
Hmm.
I was told to write my Santa list, I would put on there my Easy Bake Oven and my Kenya doll and My Little
Hmm.
Pony and things. And I thought Santa didn't like me because when I would open my gifts, it would not be the things that I asked for, but the
Hmm.
things that my parents wanted me to play with, in a sense. And so it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. It was isolating and it was devastating. And it forced me into a mode of survival that I now have the language to know, but I didn't know that then.
Well, I'm just curious. I know this is a little bit, we didn't talk about this, but
Sure.
you said your parents gave you gifts that you didn't want. I mean, how did
Mm-hmm.
you address this issue with your parents?
Hmm.
You
So I'm going to date myself here with this, right? So I come from the era of the circulator and Toys R Us. And so I have an older brother and a younger brother. I'm the middle child of three. And
Mhm,
so my mom and dad would give us each the Toys R Us circulator and be like, circle what you
mhm,
want Santa to bring you for Christmas. And so I
mhm,
would always, and we weren't supposed to write our names on it because, I mean, we all lived together. So 9 times out of 10, we would always play with each other's toys.
mhm,
But they always knew which one was mine because I circled My Little Pony and Easy Bake Oven and, the Light
mhm,
Brite and the Kenya Doll and the Cabbage Patch. And every single time, I remember writing Santa a letter asking him, why doesn't he like me? Like, why do I not get
wow.
the gifts that I want for Christmas?
Mhm,
I've been a good child. I've been obedient. I've been,
mhm,
good all year. What is wrong with my toys? And that's when I realized, kind of like, let me do my own research with this. And so I started looking one Christmas and seeing that my parents were wrapping the gifts and, they were doing, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense now. Now this is
mhm.
why. So that's where that survival mode came from, where I ended up having to find and steal and hide my own moments of joy by spending the night over my girl cousins' houses. And while their parents weren't looking, I was able to brush the doll baby's hair and play with the Easy Bake Oven and things like that.
Mm. I just, it just took me a moment because I could feel, I
Yeah.
was allowing myself to feel what that must have felt like
Yeah.
to feel rejected and having to hide who you are
Absolutely.
and know that your parents, while they love you, it's just something about you that they're not in
Yeah.
love with, right? So,
Yeah.
well, let
Yeah.
me
I
ask you.
now know that they didn't have it to give me, but
Mhm.
yeah, it was definitely isolating. I felt unloved.
Were you and your parents ever able to talk about it, or?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My mother and I are like best friends today. I'm the
Great.
daughter my father always wanted,
Oh,
and so yeah, we have a really great relationship today.
oh, oh, that's so good to hear. Well,
Mhm.
just very recently, it's been all of this attention on transgender people, like around competing in sports and
Mhm.
also these bathroom breaks. How do you feel about it? Just seems to be a kind of a narrow negative kind of box that
I think it's very sad that these are the distraction and the deflection techniques that they use
Mhm,
to get people's votes. We're talking about bathrooms. We're talking about going into the bathroom and using the bathroom, right? We're talking about
mhm,
things that doesn't necessarily should, in my opinion, gain this much attention, right? I
mhm,
think that for people who don't have trans children, shouldn't be talking on trans children and their rights. I think that people
mhm,
who don't know about transgender individuals or understand transgender individuals shouldn't try to make decisions on transgender individuals. I think it's truly devastating. I think that we live in a world that we have so much more to focus on, and that these are the things that they use to distract people from the things that matter most.
yeah. Well, it's as we've just kind of explored this whole, as I've explored this whole transgender realities piece, the violence against transgender people, if there's supposed to be some attention to stuff, that's an area that folks need to really look at. I mean, we know that 84% of the known victims of crimes against transgender people have been transgender women and women of color in particular.
Absolutely.
And in fact, when we say crimes, I mean several have been killed.
Absolutely.
Many have been
Majority of my black and brown trans women have been murdered. Yes.
killed. Mm.
And I think that
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
go on. No, you think? Go on, please.
No, and I think that we have been desensitized by using words like unalived or, not necessarily calling a thing a thing. These are human beings whose lives have been taken due to senseless violence.
Hmm.
My siblings have been murdered for just simply existing.
Hmm.
This sounds like the civil rights movement. This sounds
Yeah,
like black people. And it saddens me that we don't see the human in others when it comes to my trans
yeah.
sibling.
And we're not even talking. I mean, that's the murder. But what about the folks that get beat up and just
Yeah,
harassed because they're trans people?
absolutely.
In
I
fact, I
myself
mean,
have been, yeah,
you said you yourself have been.
absolutely. I myself have been a victim of a hate crime. I was
What
attacked
what
by
what
four
happened?
guys. Yeah,
What
I was attacked.
you were beat up by four guys.
I was attacked by four
That's
men in broad daylight the day before Easter in 2017.
mm,
For just existing, for walking in a corner store and buying something. And I think that um, having had that experience, people don't understand the fear that a trans person has to endure every day, knowing that we live in a world that targets us and subliminally gives people permission to hate us and threaten us and attack us, right? And myself being
mhm,
one of those individuals, that's why I'm a champion for my trans siblings. It takes a lot of bravery and courage to walk out of your home every day in your
mm,
authentic skin, in your
mm.
authentic skin. You are, I tell all of my trans siblings, you are an advocate and you are your sheer existence, walking out of the house every day is an act of bravery and resilience.
And how has the response from like law enforcement been, and
Hmm.
people that are there to protect all of us? How does that
Hmm.
play out for the trans people?
I think that, especially in the District of Columbia,
Hmm.
we've had to come a long way due to, losing some transgender individuals because of EMS not wanting to, service them when finding out they were trans. And now we have forced, certain public service agencies to take these cultural humility trainings and things. And so I believe that we have came away, but we have so much more learning to do. We have so much more teaching to do. And for this to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, I believe that there should be a representation of everyone displayed and being able to walk and live and love whomever they choose.
Well, what is it? What do you think is the trigger for people? They see a trans person. I mean,
Hmm.
what is the trigger that makes them feel they have the right to beat someone up? What in the world is
Hmm.
that about?
Honestly,
Or
I
do you
think
know?
that a lot of it comes from they believe, how dare you? How dare you have the audacity to live in your authentic skin? How dare you have the audacity to live out loud and be happy? Because there's nothing else that I could think of that could cause someone to want to put their hands on someone or to cause harm to another individual that has done nothing to them at all. Nothing to them at all. And we live in this disclosure politics world where people are talking about how transgender individuals are not telling the people that they are entertaining that they are trans. Well, I'm confused by that information too, because if you can tell that I'm trans, then why is it now okay that he can't tell that I'm trans when
Mhm,
now he has attacked me? Like, we have to be very careful about the way that we're representing this thing. Like, it's extremely dangerous.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's costing people their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. As you know, we're in this also in this anti DEI period. And I know that many companies that are saying they're scaling back their DEI efforts or, in fact, scaling back their LGBTQ efforts. Have you heard about that
Mhm.
in terms
No,
of?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that this is just allowing people to finally reveal who they truly were and what their beliefs really are. I don't think that
Mhm,
a lot of people believe in humanity as often as they say that they do. I think that that's something that is not true.
mhm. So let me ask you, in some of the research that I was doing, not just for our show today, but
Hmm.
for another project we were doing, I understand that there's also, even within the LGBTQ community, there's some kind of bias against trans by
You
other
know,
folks. Okay.
yes, yes. I think that in every community there is their thing, right? I think that in the
Hmm.
Black community we have colorism. I think that, there's that light skin, dark skin thing that has been going on forever.
Yes.
And I think in our community, it is safe to say that as a Black woman of the trans experience, that gay men oftentimes are the people who, in my experience, have hindered the growth of trans women the most. Pride celebration started because a Black trans woman threw a brick and decided to stand up for the community of people, Marsha P. Johnson. Everything that has been a movement in America has started by a Black trans woman, or by a Black queer woman. And so, I think that when it comes to the other letters in the acronym, I think that we have to remember that, we are our siblings' keeper.
Hmm.
We are our siblings' keeper. And, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things. I think that we now have to bridge the gap in our communities. It's one of those things, ain't none of us free. If one of us ain't free, ain't none of us free.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because our firm Alignment Strategies was doing some work with HRC some years ago, and
Hmm.
we were going around the country and we were doing focus groups to understand how diversity was playing out in the
Yeah.
LGBTQ community, and we heard some comments in some of that work around there should be a separation between the regular LGBT, LGB, no T, Q, and then the trans community, and I'm glad that that got worked beyond you know,
Yeah. Well, I
and
mean,
this
if you think about it, right, and I don't want to get too deep in it because I know that we're talking about the trans realities, but this is
mhm,
one of the things that I really beckon as a question. Every letter of that acronym is a sexuality.
mhm,
Lesbian is woman with woman, gay is man with man, bi is being attracted and having, sexual attraction to man and woman. And then
mhm,
you have trans, that's an identity.
mhm.
I
Okay,
am trans. My transness has nothing to do with whom I am attracted to.
okay.
And so, but we
That's
are in a
interesting.
community, we are in a community together and we stand in solidarity for the most part.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. So let me ask you, because we've been talking about the violence and some of the biases. What are a couple of top two issues that are also affecting the trans community?
Absolutely. I believe that there are more than, I mean, as we know that there are more than two. But the most for me in this moment and what I hear the most is, housing
Mm,
and healthcare. housing and healthcare. We're still fighting for gender affirming care, and then the more steps we take forward now with things taking a complete turn, we're completely afraid of what that will look like with gender affirming care. Every person needs gender affirming care.
Mm-hmm. And is that in fact being denied by hospitals or doctors?
Absolutely. You have some places in the United States of America that are that are saying that you can be jailed, or giving out jail time for giving gender affirming care to a trans individual or a non-binary individual.
So they put that on the level of this whole abortion.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Not having autonomy over your own body.
So we talked about, okay, so the gender affirming care. What is this about the housing? Why did you identify that as a
housing is something that, because there's a lot that goes into that component, right? We have to look at workforce. We have to look at work opportunities when we're talking about equity, right? Mm-hmm. Having to show up in your authentic skin at your workplace and making sure that you are affirmed in your workplace and that there is inclusion in your workplace with gender affirming bathrooms and things like that. A lot of my trans siblings are suffering from not having employment, to not having housing, right? Not having those equitable opportunities. And so I think that when I say housing, I think that there are so many different components and intersections that goes with the housing component. But I think for the most part, yes, that is one of the biggest things. I know that 70% of the homeless youth in the District of Columbia are identified as LGBT.
Mm-hmm. And you said 70% of the homeless.
Over 70% of people that are experiencing homelessness identify as LGBT.
And and they're homeless because their parents or families have?
Well, there's a number of different reasons, but most of those reasons, especially in my work of advocacy and activism in the housing sector, yes, it has came from rejection, abandonment, and or physical violence being brought on them for wanting to live their authentic lives.
Oh my goodness. So let me ask you, Monroe Alise, if, and speaking to this audience here on WHUT PBS, what would be one ask that you would have of them towards having a much more positive, supportive attitude and position towards the trans community? What would you ask of them?
Absolutely. So I want everyone under the sound of my voice to do this exercise with me, if you could. I want you to think about your favorite person in the world, whether that is your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your niece, your grandbaby. Just think about your favorite person in the world, the one that you love the most, the one that you would do anything for, the one that you would give anything for. Think about them. And now think, if they were to come to you and transition and say that they wanted to transition and that they wanted to live their authentic lives, would the love that you have for that person change? With the memories that you have, with the love that you have for that person change? And I think that answer, whatever that answer is, that should show you where that love for humanity should go.
Okay. And so what kind of actions would you want them to take? I mean, if there's one thing that someone could do that could be a visible demonstration of their support or understanding of the trans community, what would you want that to be?
Absolutely. I think that the biggest thing is use the correct pronouns and ask people their names. Use their names, use their pronouns. Stop thinking for people. Stop thinking because a person identifies or presents one way that based off of your experiences, that should be their pronoun or that should be how they identify. Ask the person their pronouns and their name if you are uncertain.
So give me an example. How would they ask that?
Yeah, so one of the easiest ways to do that is simply by introducing yourself first. Hi, my name is Monroe Alise. I use she, her pronouns. What is your name and pronouns?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And I'm proud of you and just what you're doing in terms of advancing your career, but also advocating for those people that you care about. When I think of letting go, gave up on the riddle, I cry just a little. When I think of letting go. So I'm going to close our show today. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out, and I wish all of you to have a be happy week. Bye-bye.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.